19 years ago, Christmas and the full moon festival were deadly. The Sumatra Andaman earthquake originated in the Indian Ocean, sweeping through more than 14 countries and territories. This is the story of a train that carried the prayers of the people of Peraliya. The train, nicknamed the Queen of the Sea, was submerged. The massive number of casualties reached the thousands. Right now, let's learn about the most catastrophic railway disaster in world history, the Matara Express No. 50. And as always, before we dive in, to help the ADB Mysteries channel grow, please give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's begin. It was 6:30 a.m. on December 26, 2004, at the Colombo Fort Railway Station. It was a busy Sunday at one of Sri Lanka's busiest train stations. At the time, the island nation was celebrating two major holidays for its main religions: the Buddhist Full Moon Festival, also known as Unduva Poya, and the Christian gift-giving occasion of Christmas. People were on holiday, so the number of passengers was much higher than usual. In exactly 20 minutes, this 8-car train would start rolling, beginning its long journey from the capital city of Colombo to the city of Matara on the southern part of the island. This journey was operated by the Matara Express No. 50, designated T50, a regularly scheduled train on this route. The train was pulled by locomotive 591 Manitoba, a Sri Lanka Railways M2A class, built in 1956 by General Motors Diesel of Canada as a Model G12. Although it was over 50 years old, it was still in use due to its sturdiness, the durability of its diesel engine, and its excellent capacity for transporting goods and passengers. All of this, combined with its regular route along the southwestern coast of Sri Lanka, earned the train the grand nickname Samudradevi, or Queen of the Sea. By 6:50 a.m., the cars were packed with people, with some even clinging to the outside. But no one paid much attention, as this was a common sight at this station. The train had 2,500 paying passengers, along with a large number of non-paying passengers and some with travel passes, totaling over 1,000 or 1,700 people, exceeding the standard capacity set by the Sri Lankan railway industry. Most of them boarded the train for tourism. Some were returning to their hometowns, and others were Buddhists heading to temples to attend prayer ceremonies for all living beings. In the locomotive, engineer Janaka Fernando had just received the departure signal from the station staff. He and his assistant engineer performed one last check of the equipment and started the train rolling. The tsunami threat. Too busy guiding passengers and checking tickets, almost no station staff noticed the incessantly ringing telephones. Earlier, at 5:01 a.m., the seismic observation station in Palekele had recorded a powerful earthquake, officially measured at 9.1 on the Richter scale, but estimated to be as high as 9.3, off the west coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. However, the experts were complacent, believing that even if a tsunami were to occur, it was unlikely to reach Sri Lanka. It wasn't until the Tsunami Warning Center for Asia and the Indian Ocean issued an urgent bulletin that tsunamis generated by the earthquake were directly impacting the country's coast, that the coordination office in Maradana began making calls. But it seemed to be too late. An attempt to stop the train at Ambalangota was unsuccessful. They tried to contact the subsequent stations but failed because the stations were empty. The staff had either fled or been swept away by the floodwaters. This tsunami originated from a mega earthquake at the bottom of the Indian Ocean that caused our planet to vibrate by as much as 10 mm. The earthquake is even thought to have released energy equivalent to 23,000 of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima. Afterward, a massive tsunami with waves 30 meters high traveled across 14 countries, causing incredibly severe damage. It is also considered one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. Returning to our train, the T-50 remained completely unaware that with every turn of its wheels, it was moving closer to disaster. No one on board could imagine what was about to happen to them. 2 hours and 40 minutes after departure, the Queen of the Sea is struck down. At 9:30 a.m., the train was passing through Peraliya, a village of 3,000 residents in the Gal district, located very close to the coastline, just 200 meters from the shore. While the passengers were still engrossed in enjoying the rich natural beauty of the fishing village, a ferocious wave was rushing in from the southwestern sea at a furious speed of up to 800 km/h. For an exposed and unprepared train, the wave dealt a direct blow to the Queen of the Sea. Hit by the water, the old locomotive immediately malfunctioned. The train slowed to a complete stop. Despite engineer Janaka Fernando's attempts to restart it, it could no longer move. The passengers were terrified, but fortunately, none of them were injured. Wanaku, a guard, and his colleagues got off the train to inspect the cars. Most were fine, except for car number 8, which had sustained minor damage. A sad reality is that in the early 2000s, although Sri Lanka is an island in the Indian Ocean, most of its people did not know what a tsunami was or had even heard of the phenomenon. So, when the alarm for this natural disaster was raised, hundreds of local residents believed the T-50 train was securely anchored to the tracks. They shouted to each other that by climbing on top or hiding behind the cars, they would not be swept away. Even more dangerously, some others tried to climb onto the roof for the foolish purpose of witnessing a once-in-a-thousand-year spectacle. "Hurry! Run to the train!" Hearing the people's screams, Chamath, a 20-year-old student, along with his parents, sister, 2 brothers, and grandmother, also ran quickly towards the train. Because they arrived too late, there was only space left near the last car. Chamath let his grandmother stand close to the train while he stood further back. After completing his inspection, just as guard Wanaku was returning to the train, another terrifying wave approached from a distance. It quickly engulfed the train. Water flooded the cars, and people began to push and shove, trying to get to the doors to find a way out. But the doors, blocked by the crowd, could no longer be opened. The cars began to shake, and the water level continued to rise higher and higher. At that moment, the guards had to shout, "Stop pushing! We'll die from being trampled before we die from drowning. Understand?" Only then did the people manage to calm down. After the second wave, the water began to recede, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed as though they were all safe, but more terrible things were still waiting for them. 10 minutes later, as the passengers were praying and hoping the train cars would act as a protective wall against the waves, the third and largest wave of fury struck. It roared as it tore through the palm trees by the sea as if wanting to rip everything apart. Water rising 7.5 to 9 meters high was ready to swallow the train, which stood less than 6 meters tall. The cars broke apart and were thrown from the tracks, swept into nearby houses. Heart-wrenching and haunting screams echoed over a vast area. The villagers hiding behind the train were almost all killed instantly. All 7 members of Chamath's family were killed. Only he survived. The passengers in the last cars were mostly killed on impact. Car number 6 was thrown the farthest. Priyantha, 50, could not contain his grief as he witnessed his daughter and 2 young grandchildren die right at his feet. They had been preparing for a meaningful day of gift-giving But it seemed God could not hear his prayers. Suppressing his grief, Priyantha, along with a few others who were still alive, including the train's guard, quickly broke the windows and escaped before they could suffocate. But they were immediately swept away by the waves. Meanwhile, passengers in the front cars were also thrown out. Most of them drowned or were struck by debris, causing severe injuries. Locomotive 591 Manitoba was thrown about 100 meters and buried in a swamp. Both engineer Janaka Fernando and his assistant were killed instantly. Thousands of people, including the dead, along with houses, belongings, and trees, were submerged in a sea of water. Yet the waves continued to roll in. More and more people died. It all happened so fast, in just a matter of minutes. The struggle for survival against the waves. After the furious onslaught, some lucky survivors were trying to escape the Grim Reaper's scythe. They managed to cling to tree branches and move to higher ground, which included nearby temples and schools. As catastrophic as it was, the T-50 train accident was only a part of the consequences when the tsunami hit Sri Lanka. According to statistics, about 35,000 people were killed, with thousands more injured and missing in this small island nation. Because the disaster struck so quickly and terribly, spanning nearly half the coastline, local authorities could not respond in time. Emergency services and the military were overwhelmed and could not conduct immediate rescues. In fact, the country's authorities did not even know where the train was for the first few hours, until a military helicopter spotted it around 4:00 p.m. Many soldiers were assembled to remove the bodies from the wreckage. Unfortunately, many who were injured and might have survived were found too late and did not make it. Among them were mainly women and children who were physically weaker and could not swim. Many people flocked from all over to search for their relatives. Starting on the 27th, Santhaika, a 45-year-old woman, went from one refugee camp to another, distributing flyers with photos and identifying features of her husband and her 13-year-old youngest daughter. According to Sri Lankan authorities, only about 150 people on the train survived. The death toll was estimated to be at least 1,700 and possibly over 2,000, although only about 900 bodies were recovered, as many were swept out to sea. The village of Peraliya was also destroyed, with 250 residents killed and houses completely collapsed. More than 200 recovered bodies could not be identified. They were buried 3 days later in a Buddhist ceremony near the site where the railway line was torn apart. The fate of the Queen of the Sea is considered the worst railway accident in the world, far surpassing the death toll of over 800 in a 1981 incident where a passenger train derailed and plunged into the Bagmati River in Bihar, India. More tragically, some local residents claimed that their relatives would not have died if the train had not been there, because instead of climbing onto the train to escape, they would have gone to higher ground for safety. The people there described and called the train a curse on their village. If only the authorities had been able to provide timely information about the natural disaster and stop the train from moving earlier, perhaps the number of casualties would not have been so high. After the accident, the damaged locomotive 591 Manitoba and 2 of the cars were salvaged. The Colombo to Gala route was rebuilt and service was restored. Every year, many tourists visit the museum in Peraliya, where they can see firsthand the remnants of the horrific disaster of the past. Additionally, a memorial service is held annually to remember the victims who perished on this train.